against the Muslim Brotherhood on July the 30th. 2 other Brotherhood leaders are facing similar charges. Well, Wayne Hay joins me now from just outside Cairo's Police Academy to update us on Hosni Mubarak's trial. And Wayne, I understand that Hosni Mubarak actually appeared in court. Tell us what's been happening.
Well, he has appeared in court. He was transferred to the police academy from the military hospital facility where he has been placed under house arrest. So he is there along with his 2 sons who are facing the same charges as well, also the former Interior Minister and 6 of his aides as well. So far it has really been a procedural start to this retrial. We've heard from the judge who's gone to great lengths to point out that this will be an independent trial. It will be very transparent. Certainly there had been some question marks about that leading up to the start of this trial, but he went to great lengths to point out that it will be very transparent and they will try their best to release all the evidence to the public to make it as transparent as possible. We've heard from the prosecution lawyers that at the moment it is the turn of the defence lawyers, and they're going through the charges and also present their names of witnesses that they want to call. Now, the most interesting name to have popped up so far is that of the interim leader of Egypt, the head of the armed forces, Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. Now, he was in military intelligence back in January 2011 when the uprising occurred and the protesters were killed. And also some mention from the defence for the first time of the Muslim Brotherhood, saying that the same crimes happened under their very brief leadership of Egypt, and they may also be responsible or involved at least in some of the deaths back in 2011.
And Wayne, of course, Mubarak has been through all of this before. I mean, his sentence was overturned on appeal. Is there as much public interest in this trial the second time round?
Well, it certainly seems to be very low-key so far, certainly outside of the police academy where the retrial is taking place. It is extremely low-key. A very small number of his supporters have turned up, numbering perhaps around 20 at the most, and then some representatives of family members who were killed during that uprising are also here. The security presence was tight earlier on. Even that is looking fairly relaxed at the moment, with apparently no sign that any large group of protesters or supporters of Hosni Mubarak are going to turn up. So it's been fairly low-key, Julie. I think there's a feeling now that as interesting as this retrial is, it is really, to a certain extent, irrelevant in terms of what is happening in the wider scheme of things in the political situation in Egypt.
OK, Wayne, thanks for that. Wayne Hay updating us there from Hosni Mubarak's retrial. Let's speak to Mike Hanna, who joins us from Cairo now. And Mike, I know that you were following the proceedings at the High Court where the Muslim Brotherhood leaders were on trial. That's been adjourned. Tell us what happened.
Yes, well, there were slightly chaotic scenes at the beginning of that hearing. The judge came in, the lawyers for both the defense and the accused were there. A great scrum of media as well was allowed into the courtroom to observe proceedings. The accused did not appear. The 6 members of the Muslim Brotherhood who are facing charges too of incitement to kill civilians. They did not appear. We are told by the Prosecutor General that that was for security reasons. This trial has been adjourned until the end of October, pending further investigation, Julie.
And as we've said, Mike, I mean, the arrest and putting on trial of the Muslim Brotherhood spiritual leader is unprecedented. And of course, it's happening against a time of huge tension in Egypt.
Indeed, yes. What was significant in the vicinity of the Cairo High Court in the course of the morning was the lack of heightened security. There were no demonstrations, no sign of any protests, no indication of any increased security presence. Now, this could indicate that the mass arrests of many Muslim Brotherhood leaders in recent days and weeks has had an impact on the organization. The fact that the general guide of the movement is in prison, remembering that even in the Mubarak years, that position was left completely untouched in action against the organization. The fact that there has not been a strong public reaction, if only manifest in demonstrations in the vicinity of the court, is perhaps indicative of how the leadership of the Muslim Brotherhood, its organizational abilities, has been impacted by this ongoing mass arrest and campaign against its membership.
Mike, thanks very much indeed for that. Mike Hanna there in Cairo. Now, Syria's government has warned the United States against any military action, saying this would inflame the Middle East. The US says it's ready to carry out military options against Syria if it needs to. It's part of a diplomatic push to respond to a suspected chemical weapons attack. Charles Stratford has more.
A rocket shoots skyward from the Damascus neighborhood of eastern Ghouta. Al Jazeera cannot independently verify these pictures that were uploaded onto YouTube. But it's the same area where an apparent chemical weapons attack killed hundreds of men, women and children last week. The Syrian government denies it was responsible, but global leaders are calling for some sort of response. US President Barack Obama has been meeting his national security advisors to consider his options. Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel says the military is ready to act on Obama's orders.
President Obama has asked the Defense Department to prepare options for all contingencies. We have done that, and again, we are prepared to exercise whatever option if he decides to employ one of those options.
Obama has said that any use of chemical weapons in Syria would constitute the crossing of a red line. But Washington says it still needs proof chemical weapons were used in this recent attack. Evidence is strong from the pictures and testimonies from witnesses. Now the organization Doctors Without Borders says hospitals it supports in Damascus treated 3,600 patients with neurotoxic symptoms on the night of the alleged attack. The aid group says 355 of those people died.
Pinpoint pupils, excess saliva, respiratory distress, convulsions that all point towards the use of a neurotoxic agent.
During a phone call on Saturday, British Prime Minister David Cameron and the US President agreed that the suspected attack by the Assad government merits a serious response. US Secretary of State John Kerry has been talking to his counterparts in Saudi Arabia, Jordan and Turkey, rallying support for pressure on the Syrian government, a government that says it had no role in any suspected chemical attack, but still denies access to UN chemical weapons inspectors staying in a hotel a short drive away. Syria's biggest ally, Russia, has called on the Damascus government to cooperate with the UN team, but has blamed the rebels for the recent attack. As international pressure increased, Syrian state TV ran pictures of what it says are chemical agents stored in tunnels that were previously controlled by the rebels. The United Nations disarmament chief arrived in Damascus on Saturday and is still negotiating for access to the sites. Charles Stratford, Al Jazeera.
Well, joining us from Dubai now is Theodore Karasik. He's Director of Research at INEGMA, a Gulf-based think tank on military defence and security issues. Theodore, good to have you on the programme. Clearly a lot of pressure on President Obama to do something, but he's unlikely to act without the support of other nations or indeed the UN Security Council, is he?
Well, I think we're going to have to look very closely at all the evidence first before the Obama administration makes a final decision on any kind of airstrike against Syria. Primarily, I think the United States will go after Syria on this in response to this event, regardless of what the UN says, but needs the support of Syria's neighbors, particularly Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and Turkey. That would probably cement some kind of action.
You've also got Iran saying that it has a red line itself in Syria, and if the US crosses that red line, there will be severe consequences. And Syrian authorities are saying, of course, that any kind of action in Syria will inflame the Middle East. It does seem as though any military option is going to make the regional problems worse.
Indeed. I think that we need to be very careful here about airstrikes and the ramifications because of the axis between Syria, Iran, and Hezbollah, and probably also Russia as well, because these entities will have to try to control the aftermath of a U.S. strike on Syria. And indeed, Bashar's threats to the rest of the region can be met through both state and non-state reactions. Could be with missile launches, it could be also with activating terrorist cells as well. So the situation is fraught with a number of different dangers.
So where does that leave the international community? Because they can't do nothing, can they? I mean, if chemical weapons have been used by either side in Syria, then that is a gross breach of international law.
Indeed. I think that the U.S. will ultimately have to conduct some kind of strike against Syria to send a strong message, because this is a defining moment for Obama's second administration. I think that the attack would probably target command and communication stations, as well as military bases and so on, where they can find the Syrian army. The danger in doing that is that, as people have been saying, there are lessons learned from previous U.S. air wars or airstrikes on other countries like regions like Kosovo. Those who are under attack also have learned lessons too, and they're able to have denial and deception tactics, so that when the U.S. strikes, they're striking at the wrong places. And I think we have to be very careful with the planning and execution of using these types of weapons and their aftermath.
Theodore, good to speak with you. Thank you very much indeed for your thoughts there. Theodore Karasik speaking to us live from Dubai there. Now, at least one person is dead and dozens more injured in a bomb attack on a Yemeni Air Force bus. The vehicle was carrying personnel to their base at the airport in the capital, Sana'a. The Yemen-based Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula has been behind numerous attacks on security forces recently. Hashim Al-Habra is in Sana'a. Hashim, first of all, what else can you tell us about the blast and who may have been responsible?
Well, it was a bomb which was planted inside the bus, and the one who made it and who planted the bomb had absolutely all the intelligence about the movement of the soldiers to the airport. Basically, we're talking about officers and aviation cadets who were going to an airbase at the Sana'a airport. So he had all inside intelligence about what's going on. He managed to plant the bomb.